Good morning, my name is Nathan Boyd, and today I want to talk to you for a little while about cover crops. All around me you can see there are weeds growing. This is what the land would look like if you didn't plant anything during the fallow period. We want to examine the use of cover crops to control the weeds and prevent them from setting seed. The first cover crop I want to talk about today is sorghum Sedan grass, which is behind me. It's a common cover crop used in Florida, and it's very effective at suppressing weeds. It produces a lot of biomass and it's very competitive. As you can see underneath the canopy of the cover crop, there are very few weeds because the cover crop blocks out the sunlight and changes the environment where weeds would normally emerge and grow. One of the weaknesses of this cover crop is it does not grow well when nutrients are limiting. In Florida we have very sandy soils with limited nitrogen, and as you can see, this cover crop around me that has been growing for several months is stunted. It has not grown well, has not produced a lot of biomass, but even with this limited growth, it still has suppressed the weed growth in the field. We've talked about how cover crops can suppress weeds, especially broadleaves and grasses. There is one exception, however. Cover crops do not effectively suppress purple and yellow nutsedge. Around me you can see nutsedge growing at the base of this crop. Although it can suppress its growth somewhat and it can prevent it from producing as many tubers, it does not control it and it does not stop it from growing. The next cover crop I want to talk about is sun hemp. It's the one growing behind me. It's a legume. It fixes its own nitrogen, which means it can produce a lot of biomass even in nitrogen limiting soils. It grows very aggressively, produces a lot of biomass, and is extremely competitive with weeds. One of the things we're looking at is mixing the two species together. And if you look behind me, this is 90% sun hemp, 10% sorghum. And one of the things that might jump at you right away is the fact that the sorghum in this plot is much bigger than the sorghum where it is planted on its own. This would suggest that it's getting nitrogen from the legumes that are growing around it. Although we haven't seen any benefit in terms of weed control, we're still early in this research, and we'll be updating you at later dates about the effects of combining the two different cover crops and the ratios that seem to work best. One should not assume that just because it can fix its own nitrogen that it can continue to grow as large where there is very low nitrogen in the soil. This particular cover crop behind me, we're on a bit of a sandy knoll, very low nitrogen content. This is 60% sun hemp, 40% sorghum. You see the sun hemp has outgrown the sorghum in this mix, but still it's not nearly as tall or as large as it was in some of the other areas where we had a higher nitrogen content in the soil. At the end of the cover crop, we mow it down and we incorporate it into the soil. There's a lot of benefits to cover crops besides weed control. They help prevent wind erosion. They help return nutrients and carbon back to the soil. We have focused on weed control in our trials, but one should never forget that they provide a lot of benefits to the soil and the environment.